to not be fully engaged in these issues. And I'm just going to succinctly try to lay this out to you for my reasons for running. Number one, the federal debt. Number two, job creation. And number three, national security, which in my mind means the military as well as the infrastructure needs of the United States, projects like I-69. Now, if Barack Obama was here tonight standing right next to me, he would tell you that he wants to solve the federal debt, he wants to create jobs, and he wants to build up the infrastructure in the U.S. for economic growth. But I want you to know there are significant differences in the way that we would do it. We have a $15.2 trillion federal debt. As you read a couple of days ago, our gross domestic product now is less than our federal debt. So if we took all the products or the agricultural produced or manufactured, whatever, and we had the value of all of that sold in the marketplace, it still would not equal in 1 year what our federal debt is. And the sad thing about it is there are only 6 countries in the world that finds themselves in a situation where the federal debt exceeds their gross domestic product. One of them is the United States, one is Greece, one is Portugal, one is Italy, one is Iceland, and one is Japan, and one is Portugal. And all the economists will tell you that if you're going to have sustained economic growth, that you cannot afford to have your federal debt exceeding your gross domestic product over a long period of time. Now that's one of the reasons that I voted against every stimulus package and every bailout. I did it primarily because I did not think there were sufficient guidelines in there on how the administration could spend the money. And in that stimulus package there was around $10 billion in grants that could be given to companies, and there was a total of about $38 billion in loan guarantees that could be made. Now this administration made the decision that jobs were going to be created in America by promoting green energy. And we all recognize that, yes, green energy has a role to play. But there's not any way in the world that green energy is going to provide the base load of electricity that we need in America. It cannot be done without coal and nuclear and other fossil fuels like natural gas. It simply can't be done. But every time Lisa Jackson would come up to Congress and talk about the litany of new regulations coming out of EPA, she would try to convince us that the reasons they were doing the regulations were to create jobs. Because she said we're going to require this country to move to green energy. And so in doing that, I just mentioned the 38 million plus 10 million, about $48 billion. So they gave money to companies out there using, in many instances, unproven technology. In many instances to companies controlled by people like George Kaiser from Oklahoma, who is the 20th wealthiest person in America, and his foundation controlled the solar panel company in California called Solyndra. They received $538 million. Many of the panels were going to be produced in Mexico. Mr. Kaiser bundled and collected about $600,000 for the president's campaign for president. Solyndra went bankrupt. And the interesting thing was the venture capitalists involved with George Kaiser in the legal documents with the Department of Energy's consent placed the venture capitalists and George Kaiser's foundation to make sure that they would get their money first if any assets were sold in bankruptcy, and they subordinated the taxpayers getting their money back. So Solyndra was one company that went bankrupt. There was a company called Beacon Power in Massachusetts, received millions of dollars. They went bankrupt. Range Fuels Cellulosic Ethanol received millions of dollars. They went bankrupt. Evergreen Solar, another solar panel company in California, received millions of dollars. They went bankrupt. Enero Battery Company received $118 million on lithium batteries. They went bankrupt. A company called A123 Systems that also was involved in lithium batteries received $249 million. They went bankrupt. The Alberta-Montana grid system, in which they built a new grid to move electricity produced by wind power, received millions of dollars. They went bankrupt. And I could go on and I could give you a long list of companies that went bankrupt. And the Department of Energy Secretary Chu and his staff made the decisions of who was going to get this money. And I think they did a disservice to the American people. Now, they've talked about that this administration is going to be the protector of the middle class in America. And yet they spent these billions of dollars instead of in projects like infrastructure projects and others that could really help our country, in speculative programs frequently, many of which, as I just read, went totally bankrupt. And then this litany of regulations coming out of EPA